of economic proposals, a thought that many would consider appealing to his critics on the other side of the aisle. My next guest says not so fast. This administration has found a way to make even lower taxes unappealing. Rick Manning is the communications director for Americans for Limited Government. He is a vocal opponent of what he calls the Obama administration's misguided policy. Welcome, Rick, to you.
Thank you, Gerri. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's talk about some of these plans that the president has announced. Not clear if he's going to get any traction on them, of course. He's talking about $50 billion in infrastructure spending, big bennies for small businesses. What's the problem with that? Sounds like a good idea if you want to jumpstart the economy.
Well, the plan that he's looking at by cutting taxes on capital expenditures is a top-down plan, as opposed to creating a situation where the overall tax rate is lowered. He's picking winners and losers, and that doesn't really work for the economy very well. It doesn't work for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you pick winners and losers like this, there's always losers, and losers who are left behind end up paying the bill. Secondly,
Rick, let me interrupt you right there, because
yes.
I don't understand why a plan to allow companies to write off plant and equipment is picking winners and losers. That seems to pretty much benefit a wide range of companies.
Well, here's the difference. Is what they ought to be talking about is lowering our overall corporate tax rate, which is going to be the highest corporate tax rate in the world in 2 months when Japan lowers theirs. We're making all of our businesses, all of our corporations, uncompetitive on a worldwide basis. And so rather than picking a specific targeted tax break that ends within 2 years, what we need to do is cut the overall tax rate significantly and allow businesses here in America to compete worldwide, whether or not they invest in capital expenditures or if they're just a business that's looking to grow in the service sector.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I was wondering, you know, right now in this economy, you may not want to spend more money even if you're getting help to do it, because you don't have more demand for your products and services. Do you think that's an issue for some of these ideas that the president is floating out there?
Well, it certainly is a problem, because one thing that tends to happen is if you induce people to make an expenditure that they really don't feel financially comfortable to make, who's going to pick up the pieces when they have to pay the bills years downstream? That's the recipe for economic disaster for individual companies who make decisions based upon tax cuts and the like, rather than based on their own fiscal soundness and their financial outlooks.
You know, you mentioned before picking winners and losers and what a disaster that can be when governments have that kind of policy. And yet the stuff that the president's talked about over the last week isn't the only time that they've decided they want to pick winners and losers. There's this whole idea that we need to give the initiative to green building, green products. And in that case, we are picking companies, individual companies that we want to be winners. What do you make of that?
Well, that's proven to not work. We see in Spain, we see in Italy, we see in Portugal, where they're moving away from those kind of green tax incentives because they've actually really hurt their economy and cost their economies a lot of jobs. Here in America, what we looked at was there's this big green energy push, and yet because of that, overseas, what ended up happening is solar panels ended up being built all over the place in Mexico, China, and in Europe. And a solar panel company here in Frederick, Maryland, that existed for 30 years before the green initiatives took place, went out of business because it was determined that they couldn't be cost competitive with the world marketplace. So sometimes it has a backward impact even on green manufacturers.
Amazing, amazing story. Thanks so much for your help today, Rick. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thank you, Gerri.
All right. If you are fired up about this or